לבנה תפרוס כאור כנפיים והשמש תזרח בתוכה ותראה כמה טוב יהיה בשנה
Good evening! That was the Maccabees singing their song Bashana Haba'ah. Looking forward to truly a beautifully brighter day. How are you, my holy sisters and brothers? Let's light up the darkness. Who is with us as we do a little beautiful learning on a Monday evening? Nancy in North Carolina, Yehuda in South Carolina, Stephen in New Hampshire, Sharon in New Jersey, James in Indianapolis, Bill in Missouri, Melissa in Great Neck, Paul in Chicago, Bell in Illinois, Rose in New Mexico, Deborah in Kern County, Paul in the Great Northwest, John in Michigan, Peter in Miami, Rebecca in LA, Leah in LA, Nicholas in Portland, where it's hot, hot, hot. How much? 109 in Portland. Wow, that is crazy. May you have relief soon. Charles in Omaha, Gwen in Michigan, Moishe wishing us a great day. Over there on the YouTube side, Jennifer in Ocala, Florida, Lynn in North Texas. Welcome, everybody. Yesterday was the 17th of Tammuz. Hopefully everybody had a meaningful fast who was fasting, and that means that we're in the 3 weeks counting down to Tisha B'Av. The 9th of Av, that the saddest day in the Jewish calendar, the day on which both the temples, the first temple and the second temple, were destroyed, as well as some other calamities in Jewish history. This is a real time to pause and reflect. Here's a beautiful little teaching from this period by Rabbi Avraham Twersky. He says, many commentaries have asked why it is that our prayers for the redemption have gone unanswered for so many centuries. The redemption, meaning the Messianic age, when Mashiach will come and usher in a completely different kind of existence. Why has it taken so long? Have the Jews not suffered enough in history? The answer most frequently given is that our prayers for redemption are essentially motivated by a desire for freedom, for oppression, for political freedom, and for relief from physical distress. Now, this is understandable. In every age, our enemies rise up to oppress us, to destroy us. I mean, the Jews have been persecuted in every place on earth, in every century, etc. Of course, the people are going to be crying out for relief. Yesterday, we had the day to cry out, help us, God, things are so bad here. Physical comfort and political freedom are not, however, the primary goals of redemption. The latter will usher in an era of great spirituality when humankind will be closer to God. If we fail to pray for spiritual redemption, it is because we are unaware of the extent of our spiritual impoverishment. One does not pray for something he does not feel he needs. Quote, Almighty One, see how our souls have been humbled. If we appreciate that our prime concern should not be the deprivation of our bodies, but the lack of spiritual achievement of the soul, and we pray sincerely for our spiritual redemption, then we can anticipate that we will merit redemption and that the 3 weeks of mourning will be converted to a period of jubilation, right? It's because our spiritual level has sunk so low in these thousands of years since we had that glorious manifestation of God, God's self in the wilderness at Mount Sinai and throughout the years of wandering in the wilderness, when we were just so tangibly close to the divine presence, and we just sunk lower and lower and lower and lower. And so what we cry out for is just relief from the troubles of this world. And that's natural. It's good. We should pray for those things. But we have to make sure that we're also praying for God's self to be revealed in this world so that we can experience the heights of that spiritual bliss in this world. What we really want is what God wants. God wants us to be close to God, and we want God to be close to God, to us. We want to be together with God and experiencing the presence of God, and that is something to pray for. It's something to ask for in our daily prayers. All right, let's get to today's daf. We are on page Ayin Ches. That's page 78 here in Tractate Yoma. This tractate, the 6th volume of the Talmud, the laws of Yom Kippur, it has 88 pages, and we're on page 78. So we're really almost at the end, and I want to remind you that tomorrow we're going to have class, tomorrow, Tuesday, and then we're off. We're not going to have this class together because we're having a family vacation. So there's no class starting Wednesday, and then class will resume again the following Friday, July 9th. So what that means is you're going to be finishing this tractate on your own. When we come back, I'll cover some highlights from all of the pages that we missed. But if you're doing Daf Yomi, keep the reading up on your own. And then when we have that class on the return, we'll have highlights from all those pages that we missed. That day, Friday, July 9th, we're actually scheduled to be reading the first page of Tractate Sukkah, the laws of Sukkos, right? So we would have made a siyum. So I'm going to figure out, I'm not sure exactly what we'll do, but we'll probably just make a siyum on that day, a little celebration of finishing the tractate. I'll cover the highlights, and then I'll, read, precisely the last few, sugiyot, the last few teachings of a tractate Yoma at that time, and then we'll have a little celebration and make a blessing over some l'chaim, we'll have a little l'chaim on something, maybe some scotch, and a little cake so we can make the bracha on that and celebrate our siyum, and then we'll probably move on to Tractate Sukkot. I guess Saturday night we'll start and maybe do a double page on Sunday, since we don't want to do double pages on Saturday night. So something like that, just giving you a little view of what's coming up. But tomorrow will be a normal class at the regular time. Okay, we're in chapter 8. We're still discussing Mishnah number 1. We're talking about the 5 kinds of affliction, the manners in which we have to afflict ourselves on Yom Kippur, and this includes fasting, as well as no conjugal relations, no shoes, no bathing, no smearing or anointing oil on one's self. And we're getting a little deeper into each of these categories. Now, on this question of no shoes, we know that this has come to mean no leather shoes. And, you can wear flip-flops or Crocs, or very often people wear like canvas sneakers, like, Converse Chuck Taylors. And so we were just asking yesterday, well, when did that change from no shoes at all to no leather shoes? Is that something that was done later? No, we're going to cover that today. So that is going to come up on today's daf. And so for those who were wondering about it yesterday, I think, Bill, you had asked, that question's going to get addressed today. So let's get into it. The Gemara investigates the permissibility of crossing water in order to fulfill a mitzvah. This came up yesterday. The issue was you can't bathe on Yom Kippur. Can you cross a body of water in order to hear a Torah lecture, even though this will mean that you go through a body of water? It's like you're bathing. You can't even bathe a part of your body on Yom Kippur. But you didn't enter that body of water in order to bathe. You entered it just in order to cross it. In order to hear the Torah lecture. And as we saw, you'll be allowed to cross it on the way home as well, even though now at that point you're going home, not going to hear a Torah lecture, but you wouldn't go to the Torah lecture in the first place if you knew you weren't allowed to cross it on the way home. And so the sages allowed you to cross it in both directions. Now that we're talking about entering a body of water on Yom Kippur, that question is also going to be connected to your shoes. How? Let's see. The Gemara investigates the permissibility of crossing water in order to fulfill a mitzvah. It works out well that on Yom Kippur it is permitted because there are no shoes, and so there is no problem of going through the water barefoot. However, on Shabbos, when there are shoes, there's no prohibition to wear shoes on Shabbos. In fact, we wear our best shoes on Shabbos. But what is the law? Is one permitted to cross water wearing shoes? Why wouldn't that be permitted? Is there a concern that his shoe might come off and he might pick it up, thereby violating the prohibition of carrying on Shabbos? The sages might decree against you entering water while wearing your shoes for fear that your shoe will come off, you'll pick it up, and then you won't put it on while you're standing in the water, so you'll carry it while you're crossing the water, and now you came to carry an object more than 4 cubits in the public domain, assuming there's no Erev, which would permit this. Now you have violated Shabbos. You've desecrated Shabbos by carrying on Shabbos. You're not permitted to do that in the place where there's no Erev that would allow us to carry. So, do we have this concern? Nehemiah, the son-in-law of the Nasi, the head of the Sanhedrin, said, I saw Rabbi Ami and Rabbi Asi come to a pool of water that they had to cross on Shabbos, and they crossed it while wearing their shoes without removing them first. So they didn't remove their shoes because then they would definitely be carrying, but they crossed while wearing the shoes without concern that the shoes might come off and they might come to carry. And the Gemara asks, it works out well that shoes are permitted since one can tie them tightly. But what is there to say about sandals? Since they do not fit tightly on the foot, at least these sandals of the ancient time, I guess they couldn't tie them very tightly, well, they might come off in the water. So Rav Rechumi said, I saw Ravina cross a river while wearing sandals on his feet. And Rav Ashi said, if he is wearing sandals, he should not cross the water ab initio, lest the sandal fall off his foot, and he violate the prohibition of carrying on Shabbos by picking it up. So it's interesting, we have a distinction here between theory and practice, right? So in theory, there should be this concern, but the sages weren't sure whether that theory had become a law or not. And then sages reported to each other, they said, well, we saw older sages of the previous generation, maybe even Tanaim of the Mishnaic period, doing this, and since they did it, it must be the law that it is permitted. And what is the law on this question? The halacha is, it is permitted to cross water on Shabbos when wearing shoes, but not when wearing sandals. And this is due to the concern that one may come to carry his sandals if they fall off. That is the law. Now, incidental to this, the Gemara reports, the exilarch came to deliver a lecture in Rav Nassan's study hall in Hagronia. So the exilarch is the head of the Jewish community in Bavel, right, in Babylonia, within the Persian Empire. So the exilarch, who sometimes the exilarchs were sages themselves, often they had a very close relationship with the sages of Bavel. So the exilarch came to deliver a lecture in Rav Nassan's study hall in Hagronia. Rafram and all the sages came to the lecture, but Ravina did not come. Now, it was very important when the exilarch visits the study hall and he's going to give a lecture, all of the sages have to honor the exilarch by being there. So why didn't Ravina come? So the next day, when he did come to the study hall, Rafram wanted to remove any anger towards Ravina from the mind of the exilarch. Right? So maybe they want to know, like, did you disrespect the exilarch by not coming? Because the exilarch is a little, he's a little bit insulted that you didn't come. So Rafram wants to check with Ravina. He's thinking Ravina must have had a good reason. So now Ravram is going to check with Ravina. So Rafram therefore asked Ravina, what is the reason that the master did not come to the lecture? He said to him, my foot hurt. Rafram said to him, well, you should have put shoes on. Ravina answered him, it was the back of the foot that hurt, so wearing shoes would have been hard for me. Rafram said to Ravina, You should have worn sandals, which leave the heel exposed. Ravina said to him, there was a pool of water on the way that I would have had to cross. He said to him, you should have crossed it wearing the sandals. Ravina said to him, does the master not hold with that which Rav Ashi said? One should not wear sandals when crossing a river on Shabbos, ab initio. If he did it, and then afterwards, okay, it's okay. It's not like he transgressed Shabbos if the sandal didn't come off and he didn't carry, but because the concern exists, he shouldn't do it in the first place. And from this conversation, the exilarch understood that Ravina meant no disrespect in not attending the lecture. It's just that he followed Abaye's ruling that, you shouldn't wear sandals on Shabbos lest they fall off and you come to carry them. Where this could become a question is, well, what if you have sandals that there's no fear that they're going to come off? Did this sandal rule become a law over the centuries so that even though we have sandals that won't fall off, we shouldn't wear them? Or do we understand what the concern was about? And so if we have sandals that won't come off, then we can wear them. A little unclear, but we're going to get some insight to that in a very interesting place with respect to a prosthetic limb. So let's skip forward a little bit. Near the bottom of the A side of page 78, they raised a dilemma before them, the sages. What is the law with regard to going out on sandals made of cork on Yom Kippur? Is it considered a shoe and therefore it may not be worn on Yom Kippur or not? And Rabbi Yitzhak bar Nachmani stood on his feet to testify and said, I saw that Rabbi Yehoshua ben Levi went out on Yom Kippur in cork sandals. And I said to him, what is the law on a communal fast? Like when there's a drought and the sages decree a communal fast that is not normally part of the calendar, but when there's a drought in the Holy Land for a long time, they would decree communal fasts. And on those fasts, just like on Tisha B'Av now, and just like on Yom Kippur, no shoes, which came to mean no leather shoes. And how do we get that rule? It's from this right here, this discussion. So he said, what is the law on and by the way, there are no more decrees of communal fasts in the case of drought. That was only done in ancient Israel. So what is the law on a communal fast that is decreed in a time of drought when shoes are similarly prohibited? Are reed sandals permitted? And he said to me, it is no different, and such sandals are permitted even on a communal fast day. And Rabba bar Barchana said, I saw that Rabbi Elazar from Nineveh go out in cork sandals on a communal fast day, and I said to him, what is the law on Yom Kippur? And he said to me, it is no different. It is permitted. And the Gemara reports, Rav Yehuda went out on Yom Kippur in reed sandals. Abaye went out in sandals made of palm fiber. Rava went out in sandals braided with reeds. And none of these sandals are considered to be shoes. Rabba bar Rav Huna wrapped a scarf around his feet and went out. So we see that even in ancient times, even in the times of the Gemara, the sages were already permitting each other and permitting their communities to wear footwear as long as it wasn't a proper shoe. And that is the law still in place today. Wearing shoes on Yom Kippur, the halacha, it is prohibited to wear sandals or shoes made from leather on Yom Kippur, even if they're only covered in leather. However, shoes made of straw, cloth, or any other type of material are permitted. Some authorities prohibit shoes made from other materials if one does not feel afflicted by wearing them, like if they're too comfortable. However, most authorities disagree with that ruling, and that is why you will see on Yom Kippur, people will be wearing anything but leather shoes, and people will wear Crocs and running shoes and nice sneakers and clogs and all kinds of shoes as long as there's no leather in them. Okay. Rami bar Chama raised an objection. We learned that an amputee may go out with his wooden prosthetic leg on Shabbos since it is like a shoe. So you can wear shoes on Shabbos, so he can wear his prosthetic leg. These are the words of Rabbi Meir. But Rabbi Yosef prohibits it. And a Baraisa was taught in that regard as an addendum to that Mishnah, and they agree that it is prohibited to go out wearing it on Yom Kippur, as this indicates that this might indicate that even wooden shoes are prohibited. The materials worn by the aforementioned Amoraim should also be prohibited. If you can't wear a prosthetic leg on Yom Kippur because it's made out of wood, and it's considered to be like a shoe, at least according to the opinion of Rabbi Meir, then maybe we shouldn't be wearing shoes that are made of other materials besides leather, since wood would seem to be in that category, and maybe that ruling was wrong. We've seen that already, that ruling is right, but now Rami Bar Chama is objecting, maybe that ruling is wrong. Abaye said, there in the case of Yom Kippur, it is prohibited because the prosthetic wooden leg has rags in the prosthesis to make it comfortable, and the prohibition is not due to the shoes, but due to the pleasure of the comfort, which is prohibited on Yom Kippur. It's a very comfortable shoe, although as we've seen, you can wear very comfortable shoes, and that is permitted. Now, the halacha about a prosthetic leg on Shabbos is like this. Since a prosthetic leg is used just to provide the appearance of a leg, it is prohibited to walk into the public domain wearing one on Shabbos, lest it fall off and be carried. And this follows Rabbi Yosef's opinion rather than Rabbi Meir's opinion, who would permit a person, an amputee, to wear his prosthetic leg on Shabbos. So I read that a little earlier today, and I was really taken aback. And I was like, are you kidding me? Are you telling me that our sages have ruled that an amputee who's already got enough challenges in life, that on Shabbos he can't wear his prosthetic leg because it might fall off and he might come to carry it in the public domain? That sounds terrible. Terrible. I did a little further research. Of course an amputee can wear his prosthetic leg. So here we have this distinction. The prosthetic legs that they had in ancient days, I mean, they just really were not very well made at all, and falling off the amputee was just very common. Modern prosthetic legs, they're much better made. They're custom made. There's a lot of technology that's gone into this. There's no fear. There's no chance that the prosthetic leg is going to fall off, and then the amputee will have to carry it rather than just put it back on if for some reason it became detached. But at any rate, it's just not a concern. And because it's not a concern, it is not a prohibition. It is not a modern prohibition. So even though that halacha is on the books, it is not a prohibition today for an amputee to wear his prosthetic leg. That is permitted on both Shabbos and Yom Kippur. The prosthetic was made of leather or covered in leather, there might be a problem. In fact, prosthetic leg on Yom Kippur, if a prosthetic leg is covered in leather, it is considered a type of shoe and it may not be worn on Yom Kippur. So there's a special issue. Although I wouldn't just listen to this ruling like that. If you're in that situation, I would just ask the question from your local rabbi and see what actually is the story. Because, it's very easy for someone who knows a little bit of law to say, I think there's a concern there. There was a halakha on the books, therefore it's prohibited, don't do it. Much harder to say, yes, it's permitted, because there's always a chance you're wrong. And then based on your ruling, this person's going to come to violate Shabbos. So people are going to tend to be stringent when asked questions. And it takes a great halakhic authority to say that something is permitted, right? And that's why we have the Gedolim, the great rabbis of the generation, and that's really what characterizes them, is they know the law so well, and that they will find a way to say yes if it's possible. So, prosthetic leg can be worn on Shabbos. On the other hand, we saw this long ago that in Tractate Shabbos, right? Or not in Tractate Shabbos. I didn't even think it came up in Pesachim, but there was a ruling at some point, right, that you can't eat corn and lentils on Passover because, this is kitniot, right, or legumes. You can't eat them on Passover because in olden days, they were transported in burlap bags to market by the sellers who brought these things to market. And those bags often were used on other days to bring wheat products. And so there was like a dusting of wheat on the legumes, and that's why you couldn't eat the legumes. There's no reason why you can't eat legumes on Passover. There is a reason why you can't eat grain products that's not in the form of matzah. So they came to prohibit kitniot. That's the Ashkenazic tradition. The Sephardic tradition permitted kitniot on Passover. Nowadays, food is regulated in a much, much more stringent way with regard to the public than it was regulated 500 to 1,000 years ago. So you can be sure that when you buy your legumes, they're not mixed in with any kind of wheat flour. Nevertheless, in those communities where kitniot was prohibited then, it remains prohibited now to eat on Passover. So, in which situations did that, when the reason for the decree ceases to be functional, when does the decree remain in force? For kitniot it does, for this prosthetic limb it may not. That's why under these kinds of questions, you don't just listen to a video that you heard once. If you really have that question, you have to ask your rabbi, and either he'll know the answer or he'll research the answer and go to a greater authority to get you a proper answer for your situation. Okay. And Rava said to him, and if the prosthetic leg is not a garment, meaning that it is not a shoe, do the rags make it into a garment? The rags are basically a padding so that it would be comfortable. Only shoes are forbidden. And that's translated to leather shoes, not other garments. And furthermore, any other kind of pleasure that is not the pleasure of wearing shoes, is it prohibited on Yom Kippur? No, only certain afflictions are mandated on Yom Kippur. Activities that are not specifically restricted by those afflictions remain permitted. And Rabba bar Rav Huna would wrap a scarf on his feet and go out, demonstrating that the comfort provided by rags is permitted on Yom Kippur. Furthermore, the continuation of the Baraisa contradicts your explanation that the prohibition is due to the comfort provided by the rags from the fact that it teaches in the latter clause, if the prosthetic leg has a receptacle designed for rags, it is susceptible. You know what? We're not going to get into that part. That's going on a whole other idea of whether the prosthetic is susceptible to tuma or not. It's just outside the discussion that we're having today. At any rate, Rava said, actually, according to everyone, a prosthetic leg is considered to be a shoe, and with regard to Shabbos, this is what they disagree about. One sage, Rabbi Yosef, holds that we decree a prohibition of wearing prosthetic leg on Shabbos, lest the leg slip off and come to carry at 4 cubits in the public domain. And one sage, Rabbi Meir, holds that we do not decree such a rule. The halakha technically follows Rabbi Yosef. We're concerned that the leg may fall off and he may come to carry. But in modern times, we don't have that concern, and so the person may wear the prosthetic leg. In modern times, we also don't have the concern that kitniot will become mixed with wheat flour, but that decree remains in place. What is the difference? Perhaps one difference is that one affects the dignity of the human being, and the sages are going to go out of their way to find the leniency for him, whereas the other one is, okay, so you're not going to eat legumes for the week of Passover. It's not such a big deal. We'll leave the tradition in place. That's one possible difference. There may be others. That's not really the discussion we're having today. I'm almost done, so if you've got questions or comments, please get them into the comments. We learned in the Mishna that according to Rabbi Eliezer, the king and the bride may wash their faces on Yom Kippur. And the Gemara asks, who is the Tana of the Mishnah? Who is the rabbi of that Mishnah? And the Gemara answers, it is the opinion of Rabbi Hanania ben Teradion. As it was taught in a Baraisa, the king and the bride may not wash their faces on Yom Kippur. And Rabbi Hanania ben Teradion says in the name of Rabbi Eliezer, a king and a bride may wash their faces. Now, when we say a king and a bride, we don't mean a king and his bride. We're saying these are two different categories of people. A king or a queen, that's one category. It's because of their royalty and the necessity for them to project the royal image. There special exception is made for them, even on Yom Kippur, that they may wash their faces. The bride, during the first month of her marriage, it's especially important, that she be allowed to look as beautiful as she can, and so an exception is made for her. So these two don't go together, right? It's the king and his queen, that's royalty, and the bride simply because she's a newlywed. However, this doesn't apply to the groom, the male newlywed. It's only the bride that has this, right or this necessity to look beautiful. Okay, so Rabbi Hanani ben Teradian says in the name of Rabbi Eliezer, a king and a bride may wash their faces. And the rabbis said, a new mother may not wear shoes on Yom Kippur. Rabbi Hanani ben Teradian says in the name of Rabbi Eliezer, a new mother may wear shoes. And the Gemara asks, according to Rabbi Eliezer, the one who's being quoted by Rabbi Hanani ben Teradian, what is the reason that the king may wear shoes? Everybody else can't wear shoes on Yom Kippur. Why is that the king may wear shoes? Because it is written, Isaiah 33:17, your eyes shall see the king in his beauty. That's what, by the way, also why we have a mitzvah. It's a commandment. If you ever have an opportunity to see a head of state in person, you should go. You're actually fulfilling an obligation. To see a king or a queen in person is a good thing, so that you shall see the king in his beauty. A king should always look regal before his nation. What is the reason that a bride, right, a newlywed woman, may wash her face so that she should not appear repulsive to her husband? Since it is only the beginning of their marriage, her husband should be given every opportunity to be, infatuated both spiritually and visibly, physically, visually, by his new bride. Rav said to Rabbi Chia, for how long after her wedding is a woman considered a bride? He said to him, as it was taught in a Baraisa, if she becomes a mourner, we do not prevent the bride from wearing perfumes during the entire first 30 days of her marriage. And this shows that for the first 30 days, her appearance is most critical. So according to this, a bride is still a bride, not even a newlywed. She's still a bride for the first 30 days of the marriage. And so, whereas if God forbid, she lost a close relative like one of her parents, during that period, one of the things that mourners don't do is put on perfume. But since she's still a bride, like on her wedding day, she can still wear perfume if she desires. A new mother may wear shoes. What is the reason for this? Due to the cold, there is concern that she will become ill as she is weak from the birth. And Shmuel said if a man is worried about walking barefoot on Yom Kippur due to the danger of scorpions, he is permitted to wear shoes since one need not put himself in danger. What did I do? I skipped stuff. Hold on a second, sorry. I should have read this. Okay, this is the part I skipped. The sages taught young children are permitted to perform all of the prohibited activities on Yom Kippur except wearing shoes. And the Gemara asks, what is different about wearing shoes? How come the kids are allowed to do the other things that adults aren't allowed to do, but they're not allowed to wear shoes just like the adults? Why? And it is because observers who see a child wearing shoes will say that adults did this for him, i.e., put them on for him since he cannot do it for himself. The child can't do it for himself. And so the adult put shoes on, didn't put shoes on himself, but put shoes on the child. But if that is the reason, with regard to those other prohibitions also, like bathing and smearing oil, they will say that adults did this for him, and children should be prohibited from those activities as well. But the Gemara explains, with regard to bathing and smearing oil, they could say that they did this for the child yesterday, since one cannot be certain when the child was bathed. And the Gemara asks, well, if so, we could say this with regard to shoes as well. They could say that they did this for him yesterday. And the Gemara answers, in the case of shoes, it is impossible to say that an adult did it for him yesterday, since the child would not have worn shoes at night. As Shmuel said, he who desires a taste of death should put on shoes and go to sleep. Never wear your shoes to bed. That is a taste of death. What is the law with regard to young children on Yom Kippur? Young children are permitted to eat, drink, bathe, and smear oil on Yom Kippur, but they are not allowed to wear leather shoes, as a single day without wearing shoes will not cause children to suffer unduly. And this ruling applies only to a child old enough to understand the mitzvahs somewhat. A very young child may wear leather shoes. During times when children are not bathed or smeared with oil every day, it is appropriate to refrain from those activities on Yom Kippur. The Gemara asks, but the Mishnah is teaching that they are permitted to wear shoes ab initio. If so, it is permitted for an adult to perform these acts for a child even on the day of Yom Kippur, and the observer will not think that the adult has done anything wrong. Rather, we must explain the Mishnah as follows. The sages decreed against performing those actions that are not necessary for the child's growth. But the sages did not decree against performing those actions that are necessary for the child's growth. As Abaye said, my mother told me, a child's growth requires hot water and oil for smearing, right? So anointing this child with oil, bathing it in hot water, if you don't do that to the child, you'll harm the child. So of course that's going to be allowed to be done on Yom Kippur. Not wearing leather shoes is not going to harm the child, so we can refrain from putting leather shoes on the child. Now, once we're talking about this, Abaye is going to share a few other things that he learned from his mother. So here's wisdom from Abaye's mom. A child's growth requires hot water for bathing and oil for smearing. When he grows a little, he must eat egg with kutacha, which is a pickled dip made with milk. When he grows a little more, this is amazing. When he grows a little more, he must have vessels to break, since he will enjoy breaking them. And this is like Rabbah, who bought cracked ceramic vessels for his children, and they broke them for their enjoyment. Not only is it normal for kids to want to break things, not only should we not get mad at kids when they break things, we should provide things for them to break, because breaking things is necessary to their growth and development. Isn't that awesome? I am reminded of when I graduated law school and some friends did some traveling, and we went to the Greek Isles, right? The islands of Greek, and I forget which Greek island we were on, but we were young and having a good time, and we went to one of those tavernas where they hand you a huge stack of clay plates. And this goes hand in hand with a little bit of drinking. And you just throw the plates against the wall and against the floor and over the table, and they smash and they smash and they smash, and it's so fun. Some people were even just taking the whole stack of clay plates and just dropping the stack on the floor, let it all smash to pieces. It's fun. But for children, it's not just fun, it's necessary to enable them to break stuff. Who knew? All right, let's go to your comments and questions. Sharon, there are shoes made of synthetic leather now. Since they appear to be leather, even though it is not, how is that considered? While not really leather, others would not necessarily recognize that it is really not and misunderstand. Okay, so look, I am not a poskening rabbi, right? I'm not a posek. So I'm not telling you like my opinion that you could rely on at all. But it seems to me, and if you actually have shoes made out of artificial leather and they look like leather and you're wondering whether you should wear that on Yom Kippur or not, you got to ask the rabbi. But it seems to me, since we've already covered that there is a concept of the appearance of impropriety, and you don't want to draw, right, the looks of people who think that you are violating halacha, especially on Yom Kippur, better to avoid shoes that technically fit the bill because they're not made out of leather, but look like they're made out of leather, right? And by the way, you could say sneakers are okay, but if the sneakers contain leather, then they're not okay, right? There are leather Chuck Taylors. You can't wear those. So you got to be careful about this. And I think part of being careful, and especially on Yom Kippur, is probably to avoid synthetic leather shoes that look like real leather. Sharon, many prosthetics and orthotics have leather straps. Even still, how are they considered? Obviously, no problem on Yom Kippur, on Shabbos, right? Leather, there's not an issue of wearing it on Shabbos, so certainly you could wear that prosthetic limb on Shabbos, assuming it's, firmly attached. Yom Kippur, it seems like it would be a problem. Now, I wouldn't be surprised if there's going to be some kind of a heter that you can get from the rabbi so that, for the dignity of the person, so that they can walk. They're used to walking in their limb. They don't want to have to go without it. But I'm not sure. So that's definitely a question to ask a rabbi, whether prosthetics held on by leather straps can be worn on Yom Kippur. That's a question to ask. Renee, doesn't one always carry a prosthetic limb? It's such a good question, Renee. Could it be considered that you're carrying when you attach that prosthetic limb to yourself? The answer seems to be no, right? When it's doing its function as a prosthetic limb, then it's being treated as a garment, right? And it's part of you, and like just like you can wear any other article of clothing, you can wear that limb. Bill, question: in modern republics, is it any elected official who is covered by the exemption of the king? None of them, or only the chief executive? Meaning, so Bill, you're asking, can a head of state, wash himself on Yom Kippur because he has to be prepared to make an appearance in public? It seems like, yeah. But I guess what you're asking, okay, so what about the vice president, right? What about the secretary of state? I'm going to guess, again, got to ask the rabbi. I'm going to guess it's only the head of state, right? The equivalent of the king. And anyone below that, no, not covered. That's my guess. But if one was in that situation, they should ask a rabbi. All right, that's what we've got today. With God's help, we'll be together tomorrow at the regular time, 6 p.m. Pacific, for the last class before we take a week off from our class while Nina and I and the kids take a family vacation. Have a great evening. With God's help, we'll be together again tomorrow at the regular time for page 79. All the best.